Hi, my name is David Ong and I'm a magician, and this is 5 flawless facts that you may not know about the show. Starting with number 1. Did you know that each season 62 magicians are booked onto the show, but only 52 of those acts are actually aired on television? And with 13 episodes per season, that means 4 magicians per episode. And that also means 10 magicians don't actually go to air. This happens for a variety of reasons and gives them a buffer, because some acts might not go right. Something might go wrong and they screw up the trick and you can't actually film it again because it's a competitive show. Or they argue against Penn and Teller because they think that they fooled them or something like that. And that no one wants to see that. Or they filmed it, it went okay, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't look good for TV. Whether that audience member just doesn't look interested, or who knows. But the silver lining with that is that the magician gets to come back again and try to fool them. And if they do, well, that's excellent, and it'll be as if it was their first time on TV. Which brings us to point number 2. Each episode only allows for 1 card act to appear. So in the whole season, only 13 magicians can appear that specialize in cards. Card magic is such a common style of magic amongst all the different types, which reminds me, I should make a video about that one day. So it can be pretty hard if you're a card magician to get onto the show. But it also means that if you do see a card magician on the show, they're usually very, very good. But if you're a magician wanting to get onto the show, you have a better chance with something other than a deck of cards. But we magicians love our cards a little too much sometimes. And now for point number 3. In my previous flawless video, which if you haven't seen it already, check it out, it'll be in the description. I mentioned that Penn and Teller talked to the magician in code to let them know that they weren't fooled. But how does this whole process work, and how does Penn come up with what to say so quickly? Well, he doesn't. Okay, let me clarify. Penn and Teller get together and they talk about how they think the act was done, while Allison interviews the magician. On TV, this goes on for about a minute, but in actuality, this can range from 5 to 10 minutes depending on the act. So Allison is doing a pretty good job of interviewing the magician and keeping the conversation going for who knows how long. During this time, once Penn and Teller come to a consensus about the act, they then speak to the producer and the judge about what they think. The producer and the judge has been listening to Penn and Teller this whole time, so they'll know whether they were on the right track or not. And they'll let them know whether they were right or they were fooled. If they were right, they'll then start to brainstorm code words to use to let the magician know that they weren't fooled.
I had some notes. My pen is running dry here. Let me get another. My pen just went dry here. I'll go to. But I think you did say a magic word. I think you said shimshi when you went over behind that. The real magic word. But with cell phones, you have no idea where you're actually calling. You know, the person could be anywhere. You could call and they could be in Europe.
The judge, Michael Close, has also started coming up with code words to give to Penn and Teller in the case that they weren't fooled, in order to speed things up in the taping process. And if they were fooled, they then brainstorm ways to let the magician and the audience know in an entertaining way that they were fooled.
Pull out the damn coin. Pull out the coin. Put it in your hand. You flip it in the air, you catch it, I'm gonna call it. If I call it correctly, you didn't fool us. Oh. If I call it wrong, you fooled it. Same way you did it.
Here we go.
Okay.
You're gonna get it wrong.
I don't think so.
Choose.
Tails!
And since they've almost exhausted all the US magicians, they've started bringing international acts in the last few seasons. To avoid any confusion, the judge Michael Close has let these acts know that if Penn says this or that word, it means they weren't fooled. This helps speed up things along in the taping and avoids any language barriers. Bear in mind this is with the newer seasons and not the earlier ones where the judging was quite rough, which brings us to point number 4. Penn and Teller don't like being fooled by false moves which lead to nothing. For example, a contestant named Jay Sankey came onto the show and he did a whole bunch of tricks. Penn then correctly guessed how each one was done based on what he saw, and this was good enough for Sankey at the time. Afterwards, he came out with a video to say that he did in fact fool Penn and Teller because the method that he used on the show was completely different from the method that Penn had guessed. So technically he did fool them. However, that wasn't in the spirit of the show. Jay Sankey probably knew that Penn and Teller know one particular method of doing the trick. So he pretended to use that method while using another method, but he didn't do anything to prove that he wasn't using the first method that Penn and Teller know. And that's the problem. That might be a bit confusing for you, so I'm going to illustrate it with a coin. Say I take this coin and I make it disappear. Initially, you'll be fooled because it's gone, but then your mind will start thinking, where could the coin have gone? And you might wind up thinking it's in the hand, and then you're not fooled anymore. Doubly so because I'm keeping my hand closed, which is essentially what Jay Sankey did. However, if I knew that your mind will think that way, then after I make the coin disappear, I would also show the other hand's empty, so that both hands are empty and I have a better chance of fooling you. I hope that gives you an idea of where I'm coming from when I say Penn and Teller don't like false moves which leads to nothing. Now, as a disclaimer, I like Jay Sankey. I learnt a lot of his magic growing up and I still do it now, but I digress. Penn and Teller like it when you lead them down the garden path and then pull the rug out from underneath them. An example of this that Teller has given in the past is from a magician named Handsome Jack back in season 2. What he did was take a paper brochure, rip it into pieces, and then restored it back to its natural state. After he did this, he handed the brochure to Teller so that he could check it out. He fooled them based on knowledge that Penn and Teller knew with regards to ripping and restoring things. In Penn and Teller's mind, when you rip and restore something, there's got to be something wrong with what's restored. And so when Handsome Jack handed that brochure to Teller, and Teller checked it out and saw that there was nothing fishy about it, it was just a normal brochure, it blew his mind and he had nowhere else to go to. And therefore he was fooled. Which, by the way, my very first video on YouTube is based on that, where I take a ripped up wrapping paper and restore it. So please check it out. And while you're at it, check out my other videos as well and consider subscribing if you enjoy me talking about magic or performing it. Finally, number 5, which is there are no stooges. And what is a stooge, you might ask? Well, thank you for asking. A stooge is someone who is in on the act when they're perceived as being not. A lot of people like to think that Allison is in on the act and helping the magician make things more amazing than they really are, but that's not the case at all. Or they might think the volunteer is in on the act, because in one shot they're here and in the other shot they're slightly over there, so they must have done something sneaky instead. Nope. What you're seeing is just the edit, which is done to tighten things up and present the act in an entertaining way as possible. Nobody wants to see a stagehand come on and put a microphone or hand a microphone to a person. They do that and then they just cut it out. Or sometimes a magician might go on too long, do too many tricks or have too many phases, and so they'll cut things out that won't have any bearing on the result. And you know this because of what I've already said in the previous points. This is a competition show after all, and there are strict rules and regulations which they must follow to avoid cheating. And in this case, using stooges and editing is cheating. Ironically, magic is all about cheating and deception, but we've got to draw a line somewhere, and most magicians draw a line at stooges. Most magicians. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Give this video a like and let me know in the comments if you learned something new. Subscribe to the channel if you're bored or you just feel like it. Until next time, always double check you're using the right toothbrush and have a magical day.